Hello guys, today I'm going to share with you a piece of an unexplored land in the game of chess. I'll show you moves that only a few were brave enough to play, where we will feast our eyes on some really crazy lines, including piece sacrifice. Alright guys, so I was going through some of my old opening ideas and I've noticed some variations that I haven't noticed before that include some really tricky moves. Alright, so for this one we want to be playing the modern Scandinavian. I really enjoy this opening because there are just so many cool attacks and variations and tricky stuff. And in this case I want to be looking at my old dubious variation where they go knight to c3, and after you capture and they play the second most played move bishop to c4, you can play this funny bishop to e6. There are already some tricks that I showcased in my video that I highly recommend you to check out. And the move that whites need to play here is queen to f3, and now we go for knight to b4. This is a gambit where you don't sacrifice any pieces or any material, but you sacrifice the evaluation. So this is the Eval Gambit. Alright, but here they have only one move, which is taking the bishop, and after you recapture, the engine will say on lichess that it's plus 2.6, which in my autistic reality is a little bit of an exaggeration, but anyways, they need to play the move queen to e4 if they want to keep this big advantage, which is not really a move that most guys will play. And of course most guys will capture on b7, which will basically win you the game in most cases. Or the second most played move is queen to h5 check, and this is what I was looking at a few days ago. But let me just quickly point out one thing. If we switch to lichess with this position, you can notice that queen to e4 is the fourth most played move, and this wouldn't even be the fourth most played move if there wasn't for this guy, Monkey King, because if you watch the most highest rated games in this position, it's just simply Monkey King, who is a cool guy trying out these dubious variations against master players. So of course the masters are going to figure out what is the best move for them, and as you can see, well, it looks like it was dubious enough for him to lose most of the games. But anyways, shout out to Monkey King, and thanks for ruining the statistics of the most played moves being the correct ones. Anyways, let's go back. So after queen to h5 check, you are going to block it with the pawn. This helps you because you want it to develop this bishop this way anyways. And here most guys go for queen to b5 check. A very logical move, because now it's a check, they hit this, they think that they have some nice position here, which they don't, because you can block it with your knight supporting your other knight, and in this position there is once again only one move for white, as you are threatening to capture on c2. The only thing that keeps them some advantage is to play queen to a4 and protect c2. Alright, this position has been reached by a couple of guys, and most of them played queen to d7, which is an okay move. But I'm going to recommend you to play bishop to g7, which not only develops a bishop, prepares you to get castled, but also comes with some hidden threats if white plays some kind of natural continuations from here. So looking at this position, I believe the most natural move for white to play is to push a3 and try to get rid of this annoying knight of ours, right? Well, guess what? That is already like giving up the advantage and handing it to black pieces. And then the second natural move I would like to consider here is if they play knight to f3. Actually, the only correct move in this position for white is to play knight to e2, as on f3 the knight will become a target for our rook sacrifice. We will get to that later. Alright, let's start with looking at pawn to a3, trying to kick away our knight. Well, now we are going to capture the knight on c3, and it doesn't matter what they capture. If they capture this way, or this way, against everything we are going to play the same reply, and that is queen to d5. Now, looking at these three possible captures, which would you play if you were white? Because I believe the most natural one is to capture with the d-pawn, as you know, it helps you to unblock this dark square bishop. Well, actually this is the worst one for white, which is nice. And well, we are going to reply with queen to d5, and now we have like a obvious threat of capturing here and getting the rook, but this move also comes with a hidden threat, which they may not see. So here, if they decide to capture the knight, it's fine for us. We will capture here and we will be able to capture the rook, and we will be up in exchange and have a winning position. And if they decide to first deal with this threat, and they will try to protect the g2 pawn, well, for example, king to f1 will run into a checkmate in one move with queen to d1. And if they play the natural knight to f3, here we can unleash our evil plan that queen to d5 brought along, and that is to play pawn to b5, just harassing this useless queen. And the queen had one job, and that was to be covering the c2 square, but now the engine is saying just get rid of the useless queen and trade it for a knight. Because if they play queen to b3, which is the only square that the queen can go to, now we can simply trade the queens and our knight lands on c2, forking the king and the rook. And on top of everything, our knight is not even getting stuck in the corner, as it has this escape square. And if they push this pawn to save it, you can get your knight inside the pawn diamond, which is just hilarious. Alright, let's go back and let's analyze the other options for white, because this was actually a losing blunder, but the other two possible captures will still render the position better for black. So let's start with b captures the bishop. Well, once again, our reply is still the same. It's queen to d5, threatening to capture on g2, but also threatening to push pawn to b5. So if white goes for this natural knight to f3, once again we have the same trick with pawn to b5, hitting the queen, and if the queen moves, we trade queens and our knight lands on c2, forking the king and the rook. So in this position, actually they have to play king to f1 to protect the g-pawn. If they capture our knight, we of course win the rook, and we will be up in exchange and winning. But after king to f1, now we are still going to continue with pawn to b5 and then trade the queens. But now we are not really threatening to fork anybody, so here we are going to play knight to d3. And with this we have a really strong outposted knight, and it's just so hard for them to get rid of it. It's also very hard for them to develop this dark square bishop, and they need to come up with this weird combination of knight to h3 and king to e2 to stabilize somehow their position. But if they don't, we have a really simple plan of bringing this rook to this semi-open file, getting long castle to bring the other rook to this file, and we will just have so much pressure and better development, and should be pretty fine for us here. Let's go back and now let's discuss the last move, which is them capturing the knight. So once again we go queen to d5 with our threat on g2. Now the correct move is to block it with knight to f3. And here we are still going to push pawn to b5. You see, this is what I like about this variation. It's just so easy to memorize these moves because they are still the same no matter what white does. So now, if the queen would go to b3, we can capture and give them tripled pawns, which is good for us. If the queen goes to a3, we can save our bishop, win the pawn, and hit them with the tempo with our bishop. So that's not good. The recommended move is to play queen to a2. Now we can still grab this pawn, but with our knight, still with the tempo on the queen. And the engine is recommending to just undevelop the queen, which is funny. But if they, decide to exchange queens, we capture with our pawn, which fix our pawn structure. And now they still don't have time to capture our poor bishop, because we are once again threatening to fork them. So in this position, their response is forced. They have to play king to d1 to avoid the forking, and we can just retreat our bishop somewhere back, and we are up a pawn, we are better developed, and we have castling rights. Alright, now let's go back. This was all after they pushed their pawn to a3. I think the second most played move here would be knight to f3, just a natural development, or perhaps even pawn to d3 to develop the dark square bishop. Let's see the pawn to d3, because this is amazingly a losing blunder thanks to this variation. Once again, bishop captures on c3, so they recapture, and now, yes, queen to d5. Now, if they try to save the g2 with knight to f3, we once again have the old same tactics. So the engine here is recommending to play king to f1, but now we have this amazing knight captures on d3. And this is winning, this is -3 or something, but let's just see what happens if they take the bait and capture the knight. Well, of course, our queen recaptures, it is a check, and they have to block this with the knight. Moving their king would allow us to simply fork the king and the rook, and we will be winning the rook for free. So knight goes to e2 to block the check. And now we go, our old move, pawn to b5, hitting the queen. Now the queen has only one square to go to, which is queen to b3, and after that we play knight to a5 and the queen is trapped. You may be wondering, what? It has so many squares to go to. But anywhere the queen moves, then this is checkmate. So this is a funny variation that I wanted to share with you. And now let's see the move that I think is the second most played one in the future. That is knight to f3. Wow, this is amazing, guys. Sorry for interrupting the analysis, but my phone battery was dying, so I tried using the charger, and it turned out the electricity in our whole town where I live in is just out. Well, what the hell? So right now I'm in my car using my car battery to recharge my phone, and yeah, sorry if the audio is changed or anything. So let's continue with analyzing. So knight to f3. Here we are simply going to get castled, and I believe one of two things will happen. Either they will get castled, or they will push a3 to get rid of the knight. Let's start with, oh, by the way, d3 is once again a blunder. So let's start with pawn to a3. Now we have this amazing move, rook captures on f3. So they recapture, and now not even taking care of our knight, but playing queen to f8, mobilizing our queen to hit this pawn. And yeah, I believe the best move for them is to grab the knight. Now we are down an exchange and down a whole piece, but the position is better for black. We are going to capture the pawn on f3. What do? Well, Their rook is being under attack, so they need to protect it, and the only good move is to play rook to f1. And now we hit them with knight to d4. So with this move, we are kind of preventing their knight to move anywhere, otherwise this is a checkmate. And there is another super tricky threat that we have, and I believe that if you reach this position, nobody is going to see this threat. And actually the engine gives white only one move to survive and hold on to their position and be like in a slightly worse position, even being up so much material. And the move is to push pawn to b5. Like, who is going to find this move? Ain't nobody is gonna find this move. And the thing is that we are once again having a strong threat of pushing pawn to b5. Because if they play like something natural, I believe like pawn to d3 looks like a nice move. Then we hit them with pawn to b5, and once again we are able to distract the queen from, protecting this pawn. And after the queen moves somewhere, knight captures on c2 with check, and we don't even care anymore about this rook. We care more about creating a checkmating net, and we bring our knight right back to d4. And now what do? Well, the engine says the best move is to push king to e1, and after that queen captures on d3. So right now our checkmating threat is just to simply play knight to c2, which is checkmate, and the only correct way to deal with this is to push their pawn. So now the king has some new square to go to. Here we are going to develop our last piece to join the fight, and the rook comes to f8. So right now we are once again threatening something like captures and getting them checkmated. And the only move is to push rook to f2, I believe, to, protect some squares here. But we can just capture this. Now they have to capture the knight, and after we capture here, they should throw in this check after our king moves somewhere. Now they have two options. They can either go for this check or try to be defensive with this move, but in all cases they are losing their queen soon. So let's see. Queen to c8 check. We just simply bring our rook back, and now they have to give us the queen, because if they don't, if the queen moves anywhere, then our rook to f1 is checkmate. So that's why they have to give us the queen. And if they play queen to e2, we can now continue with grabbing this knight with check. So they have to capture. We capture with our queen. It's a check, it's a fork, but we don't want to capture the rook just yet. The best move is king to d1, and now rook to d3 check, and they once again just have to give up the queen for this rook, because if they block it with the bishop, that's even worse for them, because we get this rook for free and they would have to move like closer to our pieces, and yeah, just devastating for white. Okay, and if they find the correct move, I mean in this position, let's say they don't push the pawn to d3. In this position they just have to play this move. So if they do this, then queen to h5 I think is the move to play. And after that you are creating a square for your knight to give them a check and just force them into a discovery check with the queen. And that way you will be able to win some material back and end up in a position that is slightly better for black. Alright guys, so let's go back. And now let's talk about what happens if they get castled. Well, guess what we are going to play in this position? Of course, rook captures on f3. And they recapture once again the same moves. Queen to f8, hitting the pawn on f3. If for some reason they want to try to hold on to this pawn, well, there is nothing else to play other than king to g2. And now they are lost, because we can play knight to d4. Now we are threatening to capture this. And yes, we abandoned our knight from being protected. And finally their queen has something useful to do and just capture the knight. This is the correct move. But after that, queen captures on f3. King is forced to go back. And now just simply bishop to e2. And in this position, white has to give us the queen for the knight. Otherwise they are going to get checkmated. So if, for example, they play something else, pawn to d3, now just queen to g4, king has to move here, and after queen to h3, there is no way for white to stop us from checkmating on h2. So let's go back. They cannot save this pawn with this, they have to allow our queen in. And what should they do here? Well, unfortunately, there are just so many variations and moves to consider that it's so hard to analyze. But let me tell you, the engine gives two variations which it thinks are the best for white, but still better for black. And one of them is maneuvering the knight to g3, and the second one is pushing pawn to d4 and developing the bishop to e3. So let's start with this knight to e2. We are able to just grab this pawn on f3, and they have to play knight to g3. Now we can continue with this tricky pawn to b5, once again hitting the queen, and it is a poison pawn. They cannot capture this, because if they do, now we are super winning once again. We can start with capturing on c2, hitting the rook, and once the rook moves, now we mobilize our knight to d4 with the tempo on the queen. So let's say the queen goes to d7. Now we can play rook to f8, just getting all of our pieces to join the attack. They have time to at least grab this pawn, but whatever. Now we can go knight to e2 check. They should exchange like this. And now, for some reason, pawn to b4 is considered the top engine move. Well, the reason is they need to get this bishop on this diagonal, and you will see why. Because now we can just go this queen to g4 check. The king is forced to h1. Now queen to f3 check. And now knight to d4. And with this move, we are threatening a checkmate, which is a knight to e2 checkmate. And it's not like they can stop it with their rook, because we have this battery going on here. Yeah, so what the engine recommends here is to just capture the bishop with the check, give up the queen, because once we recapture, now they can play bishop to b2 and pin our knight to our king. So we are not able to deliver this checkmate just yet. This is just hilarious. Thank you, engine. Let's go back. So let's say they don't capture the poison pawn on b5. The correct move is to play queen to b3. So after queen to b3, they want to exchange queens, which we are going to allow. Now their a pawn should recapture this. And we are simply going to grab on c2 once again, hitting the rook. Now the rook has to go to b1. If the rook wanders along this file, it will soon get trapped. For example, if rook to a2, we can move this pawn forward. They play whatever, and then knight to b4 traps the rook. So we are winning once again. That's why the rook has to go to b1. So let's see, rook to b1. Now we are still going to play knight to d4, and there is no way for them to save these pawns. Let's say they push pawn to d3. We can grab this, and in this position, even though we are down in exchange, we are up 3 pawns, which is just better for black. Around -2 something. Alright, enough of this variation, let's go back. Now let's see the other strategy, and it is to push pawn to d4. Well, first of all, we are going to capture the pawn on f3, and now they should bring their bishop to e3. Here we are going to continue with the rook to f8, just creating a nice battery on the semi-open file. And in this position, the engine says that the only correct move for white is queen to b3. I'm not really sure why, but probably just going after this pawn is the best try for white. And if they play anything else, the position should be winning for black. So let's stick with this move here, so queen goes to b3. Now we are going to play queen to f5. With this move, we are not only protecting this pawn, but we are also hitting this pawn with our queen and our knight. And this is where it will get pretty tricky for white, because it seems natural to try to hold on to the pawn with a rook to c1, but it is a mistake, and we can now capture the pawn on d4. Now, a couple of things can capture another couple of things. If they capture this knight, which is unprotected, then they are going to get into trouble after pawn to c5. We are hitting the queen, and the best thing they should do here is to capture the pawn on b7, and after knight to f3 check, the engine says that this is just totally devastating for white and they should give up the queen for the knight right here. So this is not very good for white. Let's say they capture the knight with the bishop. Well, here we are going to recapture with our bishop, and once again our knight is still hanging, and if they grab it, they are once again lost, and this is a forced checkmate, starting with bishop captures on f2, rook captures, queen captures, and a little bit of a king dance. Here we fork them and win the rook. And after this, they can simply just delay the checkmate with throwing their pieces at us. And here a nice move, rook to f1 check, and then checkmate. Okay. So the thing is, they cannot actually be playing this move rook to c1. They should play instead knight to e2. This is the correct move according to engine. Here we are going to continue by grabbing the pawn on c2 and actually hitting the rook. And once again, they cannot move the rook. Well, if they wish to move the rook, then rook to d1 is the best square according to the engine. But here we are going to hit them with queen to g4 check. And basically we are hitting the king and the knight. So the response is forced. They have to block this with the knight. And after that we are going to capture on d4. Now they really have to get rid of this knight. Otherwise we have some checkmating ideas with knight to f3. So bishop captures, but we can recapture with our second knight. And in this position, the best thing that they can do is to play queen captures on b7. Not just because they are getting a pawn, but most importantly, they need to be controlling this diagonal, otherwise they are done. So here, we are going to continue with knight to f3 check. The king has two squares where he can move. If it goes to h1, then we can play queen to h3, and they cannot stop queen captures on h2 with checkmate, so the only way for them is to give up the queen for the knight like this. So the king really should go to g2, and now we cannot play queen to h3, but we can play queen to h4. So we are once again threatening a checkmate, and once again the engine is saying that the best thing they can do is to give up the queen for the knight. But it may appear like rook to h1 solves the problem and covers the h2 square. So let's see this, because there are some nice lines. Here we can just develop the bishop to d4, putting some more pressure on this pawn. So let's say they will try to protect the f pawn with the other rook. Well, now we hit them with this nasty knight to e1 check. What do they do? Well, if they try to capture the knight with the rook, now we can hit them with the rook captures on f2 check. King needs to go to g1. Now rook captures on h2 with a discovered check, and basically they are done because of this queen check, and there is just only blocking and getting checkmated. so they cannot capture the knight. So what if they move the king instead back to g1? Well, now our queen can go to h3, and as you can see, there is no way for them to stop knight to f3 check, which makes them lose the queen. So actually the engine here is saying that anything white does, it is checkmate in 5, and there is not many moves that actually white can do, and the engine is recommending to push pawn to a3, followed up with knight to f3 check, queen loss, and now knight to e2 for some reason. They get checked, they can block this, but rook captures, this pawn is pinned, so the other pawn captures, and then this is checkmate. Alright, let's go back. So the mistake white made was trying to move the rook after knight captures on c2. So the correct move in this position for white is to grab the pawn on b7, after which we are going to continue with queen to f3. Now they finally have a time to save the rook, as it is hanging the whole time, and they should play rook to c1, and we should play knight captures on e4. Here they should capture this knight for some reason, and we should go queen to g4 check. Now they have to block it with this knight as it is hanging, and after that we are going to capture the rook on f1, and once they recapture we can grab the pawn on d4 with the bishop, and we end up in this position where we are up 2 pawns, and actually it appears like they might be able to grab some more pawns, which they don't, and if they do, then the position is lost for them once again. Here the engine is saying they can only play king to g2. I believe the reason is they want to be able to harass our queen with these pawns. And we have time to even grab one more pawn, so we are up 3 pawns. Temporarily, because once they hit our queen and it moves somewhere, they will be able to grab this pawn. But anyways, this should be like better for black. And this is like the engine line. So I don't know, as the moves went by, the engine realized it is still worse and worse for white, and yeah, I'm not sure what to think about this, but you know, have fun trying to analyze this at home by yourself, because now I pretty much have to go, but thanks for watching, have fun playing this variation, and you know, as always, take care and bye.